This is Small Business Conversations with Akona Machoba, unlocking essential advice, opinions, and key issues that affect South Africa's small business community.
So in 2020, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, we here at Small Business Conversations, we did an episode exploring the transition away from your traditional 9-to-5 job to running your own business. Of course, this was a time of great uncertainty in the job market. Both employers and employees were very unsure about how the COVID-19 pandemic would play out. This was also the time when tapping into the gig economy became popular, and everyone who could was doing what they could to leverage their skills to secure their livelihoods. Fast forward now, almost 3 years later, a tough economic environment characterized by incessant load shedding, high interest rates, and consumer dwindling buying power. This has flipped the script on entrepreneurship for many business owners. And now, instead of asking the question of how do I go about starting my business, some business owners are having to ask themselves, how do I get back into the job market to protect my livelihood? Joining us today to help us understand how best to make the transition is Vumi Msweli, the CEO of Hesed Consulting, a recruitment, career coaching and training firm. Thank you for joining me, Vumi.
Thank you so much for having me, Akon. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So, Vumi, you have been a career coach for many years now. I'm sure you've seen, if not all, most of the career conundrums people have had to wrestle with in their lives. But we can debate whether the last few years have given you some special case studies. Briefly paint the picture of why some people may want or need to move away from their entrepreneurship journey and move into traditional employment.
Akona, there are a number of reasons that can happen. The first is, as we know with business, not every single business endeavor is going to be successful. Sometimes we really learn and we realize that it's actually not a going concern anymore, and we now need to raise capital. So some entrepreneurs go back to corporate in order to raise capital. Some also then realize, I thought I was an entrepreneur, but actually I wanted freedom, not entrepreneurship. I'm not cut for it. And then they realize I've actually got to go back to corporate. So that's the second reason some people realize that it's actually not for them. And then the third is, in essence, the realization that I miss corporate. I am a corporate person. I need to gather more networks perhaps that are not serving me currently in entrepreneurship. So I need to go back and really gather that capital, whether it's social influence, whether it's actually financial, a number of reasons, networks, etc., then go back into entrepreneurship.
Now, with all of those scenarios or factors that you've given us there, how does an entrepreneur decide how deeply they commit to the workforce? Let's say if I'm trying to raise capital, do I go in full time, or am I on a consultancy arrangement? Am I freelancing? How do I decide my role going back into the workforce and how committed I am to the 9-to-5?
So for me, the one thing you always remember is that you carry your reputation everywhere. So if you've got to go back into corporate, be committed. Okay. So if you're obviously going to do excellent work in order to gather more potential clients, every single time you are engaging someone, they are a potential collaborator, potential client if you're an entrepreneur. So you don't want to leave your reputation in the dust purely because you're just trying to gather financial capital. So that's the first thing to remember. The second thing to remember is doing an audit of your actual business. What do I mean? What worked? What didn't work? Why are you requiring yourself to go back into the corporate space? And in knowing that actually I needed more time for my business, then perhaps full-time won't be the best basis for you. If it's a case of actually I didn't know as much as I thought I did, then choosing to go work for someone who's in a similar industry for you to learn a lot more, then I would say then do that full-time, learn the lessons in order for you to implement them, the lessons that are well learned in your business. So it's really about understanding why are you leaving your business, then saying how can corporate better equip me to make sure I don't repeat those errors or don't find myself in the same space. That will make you decide how much you actually commit.
That's quite interesting, Vumi, and I just want to spend a bit more on that point. So, for example, for those people that realize that, oops, this is not for me, and decide to go back to your traditional corporate job, how do they decide what role they take up? Do they go back to the role that they had before going on the entrepreneurship journey, or is there wiggle room maybe for them to explore new roles, maybe from the lessons they may have learned as a business owner?
So what's very important here is for you to realize what is the skill set you've acquired whilst being an entrepreneur. So those are skill sets you did not have when you left corporate. So how you repackage that in order to be more attractive to a potential employer will actually determine the roles you can apply for. So I don't think you need to go back at the exact same level you left. I think you can look at growing, etc., and also specifically around leadership and strategy, because entrepreneurship demands that of you. And if you've done well and you've learned your lessons well in entrepreneurship, you should be able to implement them in any business. So for me, in looking at what the next role is, what is my next after entrepreneurship, right? So I actually have decided it's not for me. I want to become a C-suite executive. Okay, what do I need to get there? And how quickly can I get there leveraging the lessons learned from entrepreneurship? Do I repackage it to a potential employer and say, now I've got the spirit of entrepreneurship, and my approach in your business will be treating it as if it's my very own. So repackaging that skill set will then determine where you actually can go and which roles you can apply for.
You mentioned repackaging one's skill set, and I want to speak on auditing one's skills. So we know entrepreneurs, especially in the beginning, do a lot in their businesses. If they're starting off on their own, they run a lot of the HR, the finance, legal, everything, they do it. How do you then audit the skills so that it fits into your traditional CV? Because now we're going back to sending your CVs around to your employers. How do we repackage our skills so that they appeal to the other person on the other side?
Every single time you apply for a job, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, you tailor make that CV for the particular job. So you have to read the job spec to determine what do they require that you can then repurpose for that to answer the question of, are you the right candidate? So the job spec will let you know what you should be repurposing your current skills for. So if it says we need a strategic thinker, then you can say, I'm a strategic thinker. I've actually executed A, B, C, D in a small business. I doubled the profits in 2 years. Or I grew the geographical location. You then leverage your experience to answer the request that they have in the actual job spec.
And the value that they bring into the workplace, it's great, but what is the employer looking for? How can we tailor our CVs rather to appeal to what the employer is looking for? Sorry.
So the employer has a job spec. So in looking at the job spec, they're going to say, these are the criteria. This is our ideal candidate. I always like to think of it as your dream man or woman. Right? This is everything you want. The employer is aware that they're not going to get everything that they want. But the closer you can get to that, the better. So now if you're saying, the employer says, I want someone who's financially competent, then you can say, I work closely with the accountant. I was auditing the books. I was sitting with the auditors, looking at the books every single month, preparing monthly statements. That's what you have to do as an entrepreneur. You now can bring that skill set in and answer that request in the job spec by articulating how you did it in your actual business. What becomes important is your ability to articulate using actual facts and figures. How much did you grow the business by? What was your impact? Being able to answer that, which is very easy as an entrepreneur, because you usually are starting from a base of zero, that every little cent and penny that you are able to generate, you can then say 100% growth, 300% growth, 400% growth, because in essence, that's what you've been able to do.
And with regards to the challenges that entrepreneurs can face moving into the workplace and not necessarily being their own boss and not having that freedom to make those calls as they would have, and they might have a different perspective maybe from the leadership they end up moving into. How do they handle those challenges, and how do they still not divorce who they are with their entrepreneurial mind, but still deliver what is expected of them?
For you to be a great leader, you need to know how to be led. And as an entrepreneur, every single time you work for another business, you know you're working for another entrepreneur. Okay? Someone else built that business. So what can you learn and respect how they do things, even though it might not be your frame of reference or how you want to do things in your business? Unfortunately, the moment you take that paycheck, you are now saying you are comfortable sacrificing doing things your way. you are here to do it another person's way, because you aren't at the space where you can do it your way. So learn from other people, learn from other businesses. For me, the opportunity to work in corporate is a fantastic university with limited expenses. And the reason for that, the expenses, because we all know as entrepreneurs, experience is expensive. It costs you a pretty penny. But if you work in someone else's business, you can roll out some of your ideas without the financial cost and burden to you. So leverage that. So by the time you are doing it in your own business, you've learned the lessons. You in corporate lets you learn what to do and what not to do. So get comfortable learning the lessons, and hopefully when you go back into entrepreneurship, should you choose to go back, you are better for it and you're more strategic in how you actually roll out and implement things.
So what I'm hearing from everything you've said so far is the return to corporate should not be the end for the entrepreneur, that they could use that as a break for themselves to kind of rejig and remaneuver and rethink their path back onto entrepreneurship. Is that correct?
Yes, I don't think so. A lot of people see corporate as where your dreams go to die. I don't think so. For me, it's an opportunity to have them polished. If you are an entrepreneur at heart, I was an entrepreneur with my side hustle whilst working in corporate throughout. And I never stopped having the desire to grow and build my own business. But the time wasn't right for me to do so. So I actually was able to enjoy learning from people who had grown their own businesses in financial services sector, in the telecommunications sector. So for me, I really think it's a great, great opportunity to learn, but it should not be where you let your dreams die. It does mean you have to overextend yourself. It does mean at 5:00 when it's tools down at work, your real job then begins. In building your business in the evenings and after hours.
And how do you deal then with that mental challenge that's definitely going to come with, first of all, leaving your baby to go back to employment, and then secondly, being a employee, meaning you now take direction from someone else, you might not agree with it, that comes with its own frustrations, and then maybe someone who chooses to continue having a side hustle to keep that entrepreneurship spirit alive. How do they handle that mental weight, and how do they keep themselves in a good place mentally?
I love the way you compared it to your baby, because it's exactly like being a mother. You love your child, you adore your child, you want to spend 24 hours a day with your child, but your child needs to eat, which means you need to work. That's exactly what you have to do with your business. You do not let it die, but you have to do what you have to do in order to sustain it in the long term. So these short-term sacrifices of giving up your freedom, of giving up, just focusing on your passion to go do what you have to do in order to sustain it in the long time is how you keep it alive. For me, it was always the moment of, okay, I've got to wake up this morning. I've got to be at an office meeting at 7:00. When I'm my own boss, I'm not going to have meetings on a Friday at 7:00 in the morning. But for now, I'm not my own boss. I'm going to be at the meeting. You find moments of inspiration in the frustration to say, I do this now, but I'm not going to have to do it forever.
That's actually quite a nice point over there. And to just round up the conversation, I think this is an uncomfortable truth and it's an uncomfortable reality, but it's going to be a question that pops up. So the elephant in the room, once you're sitting across your employer or whoever is conducting the interview and you're having a discussion on your experience and why you fit for the job, the elephant in the room becomes, you were an entrepreneur, you're not anymore. Why? How does someone who might still feel very sore about that reality address that in a way that does not take away their power in that moment?
I love it because we have had COVID. As simple as COVID happened. That's it.
So we're just going to blame everything on COVID? What if we started after COVID?
If someone asked me, why am I going back to corporate? That is honestly what I would say. And the reason I would say that is because it probably, if you're an entrepreneur going, I'm yet to meet an entrepreneur who's gone back to corporate in the past 4 years, who is not as a direct result of COVID. Many businesses would have thrived had it not been for the reality of wallet share going down, of a market landscape that they'd never seen before, that we haven't seen since the Spanish flu. It is a reality. Or alternatively, if you realize it's not for you, then you say, I realize it's just not for me. The challenge, however, of saying, oh no, you're a bit precarious, because remember, you're going to work for someone who wants the best of you and wants to know you invested in their business. Not that you're there to learn from their business to make yours better, which is inherently the opposite of what most entrepreneurs are there to do. So really shifting the focus on COVID shifts the focus away from, oh, so you're just here because you need a job and you need to gather capital so you can go back and make your dreams. I'm yet to hear a successful interview that starts with, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm just here to gather capital. I'll be gone shortly.
So what level of honesty then do we bring forth? You do mention that, okay, saying it's just not for me, but then how do I keep my strength in that moment and not seem like not the best candidate for the job? So do I say it's not for me, but in that journey I learned this and I learned that, and this is what I bring to you as the employer? How do I best package that moment?
You being an entrepreneur and you being an employee are two different skill sets required. So you not being great at entrepreneurship, or entrepreneurship not being for you, is not a reflection of how you would perform as an executive. So let's just get clarity there. So for me to say it's not for me, I learned a number of great lessons. The first is I really like, growing somebody else's vision. It works for my personality. That's perfect. That's all you need to say. It does not diminish you by saying, I tried this, it's not for me. It's like often people feel embarrassed of saying, I worked in one particular space for a few weeks and I realized it's not for me. We started to say employers respect employees who know who they are and what works for them.
And that is Vumi Msweli, career coach and CEO of Hesed Consulting. Thank you, Vumi, once again for your time.
Thanks so much for having me, Akona. I appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and follow Small Business Conversations and don't forget to share our episodes. If you want to contribute to the conversation, you can tweet me at machoba_a, or you can email me at smepodcast@moneyweb.co.za to share your thoughts and suggestions for future conversations. Till next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to Small Business Conversations with Akona Machoba. To listen to more Moneyweb podcasts, go to moneyweb.co.za, the Moneyweb app, or your favorite podcast platforms. Moneyweb, your trusted source for business and investment insights.